Thanks, Derek, and thanks, everybody. So firstly, let me just say thanks very much to everybody at NMI for being so easy to work with for the last 3 years. Hussein is going to find that it's a cinch, this job, actually. But no, it's been a real pleasure working with Derek and the whole of NMI team, so thanks very much, guys, for being a great team. I'm going to basically talk about some of the background of why we think now might be a good time to move NMI into its kind of next phase. And I started off by looking at the world's top technology companies. Here's the kind of logos of the top 27, actually, only because it fitted in a page of rows of 9x3. And you see there's a few names there that you probably recognize if you can see them, like Intel, NVIDIA, NXP, and so on, that are definitely chip companies, other electronics companies like HP and so on. A lot of other companies, though, that are, clearly software companies or developing other kinds of technology. But the interesting thing about that group of companies in terms of, and these are the top market cap technology companies in the world, the interesting thing is that the market cap combined of those companies is actually $3.6 trillion. So that is roughly twice the UK national debt in terms of the whole value that's been created for shareholders. And much of that shareholder value sits in the hands of founders and people who sort of bought the stock along the way, really, which is just an amazing creation of value that we've seen in technology over the last several years. The other thing that's kind of interesting about that is if we look at the type of companies there, 90% of those companies are American companies. And in fact, in terms of Europe, and I've added the Union Jack there now, so UK and the EU, it actually only comes to 5%. So despite the fact that we've seen this huge explosion in value in tech, it's absolutely dominated by American companies, as I think we all know, really, and that the UK and Europe are really significantly underachieving, really, what we ought to be able to do. The other 5% is obviously Asia Pacific. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, in terms of your creation of new companies, if we look at the amount of investment in hardware and software startup companies in Europe as a whole, in 2011 that came to about 5.9 billion. So a pretty large chunk of change went into invest in early stage companies. Of that, actually, that's total. Actually, of that, 27.6% of that actually went into hardware and software companies. So roughly about a quarter of it. By the time we get to 2015, the amount of money invested in European tech is actually grown dramatically. So last year it was 12.9 billion euros invested in tech. So that is about a third of what gets invested in the US. So it's nowhere near as big as the US, actually. But nevertheless, it's a massive increase in investment in technology companies. And in fact, the amount going into hardware and software companies of that has actually gone up. So the total amount of early stage investment in hardware and software companies has increased pretty dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think we're in a phase, really, where the world is kind of awash with cash, and it is looking to put it into startup companies. And some of that is going into venture, and some of that is going into IT, hardware, and software. If we actually sort of dig into that a bit more in terms of what kind of companies are there, you see a slightly different pattern emerging, actually. So a lot of that investment is going into software companies. So looking from the 2006 timeframe, where it's roughly 50-50 between what gets invested in hardware companies, what gets invested in software companies. By the time we get to 2015, it looks more like 80-20 in terms of software versus hardware. And that trend, I think, is probably going to continue, really. So therefore, there's more companies being born that are leveraging software capability than leveraging hardware and IT, certainly in Europe. By region, the UK does pretty well, actually. So if we look at the investment in European tech by region, the UK is accounting for over a third of all European tech investing. So no other region, or certainly no other country, attracts that much capital. So we're definitely able to create interesting businesses and attract capital to them, and put companies at the beginning of a conveyor belt, and able to do that better than any other kind of European region. So that is definitely encouraging for what we might do in the next few years. And really, you can see that even Germany, Switzerland, and Austria combined is less than half of what's actually happening here in the UK. So. And much of that sort of relates to the output of talent from our universities and our ability to sort of create interesting new companies. The US actually outputs roughly 500,000 STEM graduates every year, so science, technology, engineering, and maths graduates, that's obviously a lot of output graduates. The UK outputs about a fifth of that. So roughly 100,000 graduates every year in STEM subjects. So we have a reasonable amount of raw talent. You would expect, therefore, UK to represent 20% of the pie in terms of market cap of technology companies, but it's clearly not. It's more like 1%. And if we look at Europe as a whole, actually Europe as a whole outputs 1.1 million STEM graduates every year. So as a whole, we have more than twice as many STEM graduates as they have in the US. And I mean, clearly, what has been happening in the UK, and part of the reason that that investment has been so high, is that we have been able to attract talent from other parts of Europe, bring them to the UK, and help create and build new businesses here. So one of the things that possibly we need to think about for the organisation going forward is how to kind of make sure that tap doesn't get switched off, and how we don't get starved of resource as we try and build our businesses and build global scale businesses here. So that's definitely going to be a challenge for us. And if I just look at the global ranking in terms of raw talent, this is the top, I think it's the top 40 universities globally. These are, I've just picked computer science as an example. But the UK has got absolutely world-class universities. So it's got top 10, top 30, and top 40 universities. So on this chart, I think we've got Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, Edinburgh as good examples of very, very strong schools. But obviously the UK's got many, many more than that. I'm not going to list them all, but Southampton and Manchester and blah, blah, blah. So there's lots and lots of strong talent that is coming here. So we've got lots of raw ingredients. So we've got raw ingredients, we've got access to capital, and we have a kind of track record of putting companies together and building them. And the area that we think the UK is good at and still excels at and can excel at more is a kind of general area that we might describe as deep technology. So where the engineering really hits the bare metal really, and that that could be obviously in the areas that a lot of our companies have been involved in: semiconductors, electronics, and embedded software. But it could also be other areas which also touch the bare metal, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. So we do have one of the characteristics of those businesses is that they need sustained investment over a longer period of time, and that those do create sort of investment challenges. But deep technology does have those strong roots in the UK. So we've got raw talent, we've got capital, we've got a strong core electronics and semiconductor base, and we could and we definitely must build a new generation, or help build a new generation of startup companies here that are going to sort of take on and lead the world and take their place in the sort of pantheon of top 27 companies. So we definitely should be aiming that in the next 10 to 20 years, we need more Union Jack or EU flags, whichever side of the equation you come from, on that chart, to counterbalance the US dominance in that space. And so, so what we've been thinking about is really, what is the best way really of leveraging? We have within NMI, great deep expertise across our members in some of the core fundamental technologies here. It's not the entire space of what you might call deep technology. So there are other critical areas, I think, where we have proven and can prove again that there's enough critical mass to create a cluster of companies that can work together and get value from working together, both linking to universities, to governments, to each other, and to other industry players on a global basis. And so if we identify clusters of company in particular deep tech areas, then that's an area that we can add value by creating a mechanism for that clustering that can be part of an overall plan. So we definitely, we've done that already, I think, in ASIN, in IoTSF, in power electronics, and obviously in the core base of NMI, which is semiconductors and electronics. And so we can sort of imagine NMI becoming a kind of umbrella organization to represent a number of companies, large, small, startup, universities and so on, in those key critical areas, and then building sustaining technologies that will help those companies be successful in the longer term. So I think the mission at this point, I think, is really we ought to better identify clusters and representation gaps that actually, in some ways, will go beyond our existing base. We've got a couple of examples already. We can offer focus. We can offer promotion. We can help target some projects. We can create linkages across those clusters, and we can make the promotion and support of deep technology companies in the UK a kind of shared mission across all the members in the group, and in doing so, definitely add value to existing NMI members as they develop their businesses as well. So the question is really, how do we do that from where we are now? And for that, I'm going to hand over to our new chairman, the indomitable Sir Hussain Yossai. Hussain, over to you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.